Welcome to Move the Chains with Jonathan Rivers. Here's your host, Jonathan Rivers.
And as always, let there be football. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Jonathan Bam Rivers. Buy or sell. First edition on Move the Chains today. I'm real big in the stock market. And I'm real big on a lot of teams and some players in the NFL. There are also some individuals and scenarios I feel like you should sell on. So I'm going to talk about that on First Down. And as always, I'm coming to you, the fans, to answer some of your questions that are coming from social media. I love the interaction. I love to hear what you want to talk about. So I'm definitely going to do that as always. And when it comes to my nonsense narrative, a lot of people don't think that just because you win your division, you should have a top 4 seed when it comes to the playoffs. And I just think that's ridiculous. So I'm definitely going to speak on it. And there's a segmented population of players that are currently in the National Football Hall of Fame that come from colleges you probably wouldn't think they come from. I'm definitely going to talk about that and much more this week on Move the Chains. But you know how we do it. Let's kick it off with First Down. All right, so for somebody who does some investing here or there, not anything huge, but I do some investing here or there, I'm pretty into the stock market. And when we're talking about buying or selling, so when I look at the NFL, I say, well, what are some people, what are some players, what are some teams that I would potentially buy stock in or sell stock in? And these are people in situations and teams that I either believe in or that I don't necessarily believe in. So let's go ahead and get it rolling. So first I want to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers. And I would simply say, yes, I'm buying stock. And then I would ask you, why wouldn't you buy stock in Kansas City's wide receivers? And I know what the comeback's going to be. Well, the receivers of Kansas City, Jonathan, they led the NFL in drops last season. They did. But they still won a Super Bowl because they made big catches when they needed to, like Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who was probably the most maligned out of that group. But if you think back to 2018 through about 2021, when Mahomes had Tyreek Hill, and he had, of course, Travis Kelce, everybody celebrated the Kansas City Chiefs because of their dynamic offense and their explosive big playability. So I would equate them to Mike Tyson at that point in time, right? Tyson went into the ring and knocked somebody out in the first or second round with a big blow, and it was a wrap. And that's what Kansas City was doing with their offense with Tyreek Hill at that point in time. But then he got traded to the Miami Dolphins because they didn't want to pay him all that money, which turned out to be a phenomenal move because of the way they drafted and developed. And then the last 2 seasons without Tyreek Hill, they've won back-to-back championships. And I think they become more Floyd Mayweather, right? They haven't had as many explosive plays necessarily like they did with Tyreek Hill from the receiver standpoint, but they became even more efficient. Do you know when they played Buffalo last year in the divisional round, they ran almost half the amount of plays that Buffalo did and still came out with more yardage? They were that much more efficient. So it's not necessarily about the big plays, it's about the efficient plays for the Kansas City Chiefs. And as long as you have Andy Reid coming up with the game plan and Patrick Mahomes being able to execute the game plan the way he does, I think you have to buy stock in the Kansas City Chiefs, especially with who they have in the wide receiver room now. Adding Hollywood Brown, drafting Xavier Worthy. Justin Watson has always been phenomenal in that offense in my estimation, and not to mention Rashee Rice, who was a rookie last year, who grew into their #1 receiver. Don't know if he'll be on the field for the duration of the season, pending some off-field incident. However, he's on the team now, he hasn't been suspended, and that's why I'm buying stock in the Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers. All right, moving on and buy or sell. The New York Jets, I'm selling. I'm selling stock in the New York Jets. And if you want to tell me that they have a 4-time MVP at quarterback, they have a Super Bowl champion at quarterback, I'll buy it. But the problem is, that's all you're looking at. See, everybody wants to look at what Aaron Rodgers did in Green Bay and says, well, listen, he was in Green Bay with Nathaniel Hackett and won MVPs. He was in Green Bay when he won those MVPs, and when he won a Super Bowl, he was in Green Bay when he was able to do these things and get to the playoffs. And I keep trying to tell people, yeah, do you understand that you keep saying when he was in Green Bay? He's in New York now. And while the Jets have a phenomenal defense, they've got all pros up and down the defense. They've got Quincy Williams. They got his brother Quentin Williams. They got Sauce Gardner. They're not bereft of talent, but they're bereft of culture. That's why they have the longest drought without a playoff win in the NFL right now. The New York Jets, when it comes to talent, have, I think, what it takes. But culture matters. Cohesion matters. Camaraderie matters. And for everybody that think that it doesn't matter, I think you're off your rocker. And people say that it matters. They understand that, but for some reason when it comes to the Jets, Aaron Rodgers cures all. You're going to have to prove me wrong, but I'm selling stock in the New York Jets right now because I don't think they're a team culture-wise who's ready to take that next step to becoming a championship contender like a lot of people think they are. All right, so next on buy or sell, the Atlanta Falcons run game. See, this is where I don't understand why a lot of people think I have a problem with the Atlanta Falcons. I already told you I think they did a great job in drafting Michael Penix Jr. I told you I think Kirk Cousins is an upgrade at the quarterback position, but people always think that I'm trying to hate on the Falcons. But this is what I'll tell you. Do you know what people focused on during the draft? They focused on the quarterback and they focused on what defensive players they drafted. I'm going to focus on what they didn't do. You know what the Falcons didn't draft this past draft? They didn't draft an offensive lineman. Do you know why? Because they had a top 7 offensive line last year. Their run game was top 10 last year. 7 of the top 10 teams in terms of rushing attacks last year made the playoffs. Running the football still matters, and that's what the Falcons have tried to create as their identity. Now, why do I say that? Because when you got guys like Jake Matthews, Caleb McGarity, and then Chris Lindstrom, who at right guard was one of the best rush offensive linemen, period. He graded out higher than any other offensive lineman when it came to the run game. If you want to be successful with that offense, it has to start with the run. I understand everything they have on the outside and going in and getting Kirk Cousins to bring him in to run this offense. But he's always been at his best when the play-action game is working, which means the running game has to work. So I'm completely buying stock in the Atlanta Falcons run game because our offensive line is phenomenal. And unless Raheem Morris goes away from this identity, which I think he's too good of a coach to do that, I think they can have success offensively if they focused on the run game first. And for that reason, I am buying the run game in Atlanta. And lastly, I want to talk about Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert. I'm buying stock in these two. Does this lead to an AFC championship or a Super Bowl this year? No, not in my estimation. But the reason I'm buying stock is because I believe in Jim Harbaugh. Not necessarily in his results. His results have been phenomenal, but they've been phenomenal everywhere he's been. You know why? Because he has a culture and he has a recipe and a philosophy for the way he does things. The more and more people want the NFL to change, the more and more it'll stay the same. Jim Harbaugh understands the talent he has at quarterback that hasn't necessarily led to the production in terms of wins and in playoff victories that the Chargers organizations would have hoped for with Justin Herbert. He knows that he has a quarterback that is phenomenal. And if I just need him to be great on 4 or 5 plays, let him be great on 4 or 5 plays rather than put him in position to have to be great 50% of the time and possibly turn the ball over or put our team in position to be unsuccessful. Jim Harbaugh is not like that. He's a smart coach, and he understands that philosophy, running the football, play-action game, and playing defense matters. So for that reason, I am buying Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert. All right, that's it for Buy or Sell right here on First Down. When we come back from the break, it's your questions via social media. We'll be back when we move the chains right after this. And welcome back to Move the Chains. And as always, we're about to go to your social media questions here on Second Down. But before I do that, I want to take time to thank you sincerely, the fans, for watching the show. I've gotten a lot of great feedback. I appreciate the fact that people are excited to see what we're doing here. That it's a passion of mine. This is a blessing from the Lord. I give all glory to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for this opportunity. I just want to thank you guys for supporting Move the Chains. And as always, I can't forget about the production crew. I don't think you understand the work that they put in to make sure that Move the Chains runs the way it should run. Because I'm somebody that has a high standard and they do as well, and that's why we work so well together. So shout out to the best production crew in the business. But no more delay, man. Let's go ahead and get to it. It's time for Second Down. All right, so as always, you know, this is when I like to bring in social media questions from fans and let them either kill me or celebrate me for my takes. But remember, I'll always give you what I truly feel about a situation. I'm not trying to do it because I want to make you feel a certain type of way. I do it because this is the way I feel about a certain take. So all my takes are as clean, right, and are as deep-seated as they can be when it comes to my thoughts and the way I look at football, especially when it comes to the NFL. So let's get to your first question of the day. Is Joe Burrow an elite quarterback? It's funny how that diatribe preceded this question. Joe Burrow is not an elite quarterback. See, when I say that, you think I don't like Joe Burrow. I'm a big fan of Joe Burrow. When Joe Burrow got leveled his first year at LSU when they were playing UCF in the bowl game, and it looks like he was going to get knocked out of the game, and he led them to like a 20 or some point comeback, Joe Burrow has always had my fandom. He's one of my favorite players in the NFL, but he's not elite. And the reason I say this is because as good as Joe Burrow is, I think we celebrate him for one thing, beating Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game a few years ago. That tells me more about Patrick Mahomes than it does about Joe Burrow. Not because Joe Burrow's not phenomenal, but it's because if that's the one thing you can stand on, it happens. It hasn't happened often, which is why people call him elite. But has Joe Burrow won a Super Bowl yet? He hasn't. Has Joe Burrow won an MVP yet? He hasn't. Joe Burrow has only been healthy for 50% of the time he's been a starter in the NFL. So by me not calling him elite, it's not me calling him trash. It's not me calling him terrible. It's not me even saying he's not a top 5 quarterback, because he very well may be that. I want Joe Burrow as my quarterback if you ask me if I had an NFL team. But to call him elite is, to me, to diminish the word elite in itself. This is why I have very specific standards when I'm calling a quarterback elite. So while he may be very good, you can't necessarily call him elite if he hasn't accomplished elite things as a quarterback in the NFL. All right, what do we have next? Is Mike Tomlin still a top-tier coach? Come on, man. Let me break it down this way. If I were to literally break the NFL down into tiers, there are 32 teams, so let me break it down into 4 tiers, right? First tier, second tier, third tier, fourth tier. 8 teams per tier. There's nobody that can tell me with a straight face that Mike Tomlin isn't a top 8 coach in the NFL. This man's been to 2 Super Bowls, won 1 Super Bowl. What other coach has never had a losing season as a head coach? And he's done it for almost 2 decades. Now, having said that, I still want them to perform better. I still want Mike Tomlin to be a team that doesn't necessarily hover around 500 every year. And I know he's done it without a quarterback. And this has been an organization that has been successful like no other. I think the Packers, the Steelers, the 49ers, the Cowboys, and the Patriots kind of had set the market, and the Chiefs are coming now about organizations that have been set for a long period of time. Mike Tomlin is still a top-tier coach, even though I think he can still get better. And he'll tell you that, I believe, if you asked him, which is also what makes him a top-tier coach, because he's a developer of men and he never takes anything for granted. He always tries to get better. All right? Our last question of the day is, will Josh Allen be better without Stephon Diggs? I don't even know why this is a question. The answer is a resounding yes. Is Stephon Diggs phenomenal? He is. But when you're phenomenal at the wide receiver spot, and you're as demanding as Stephon Diggs is, and you have a quarterback that wants to give his wide receiver the ball as much as he can, which I think you should do, but you can't do it and force things. You can't do it and compromise the flow of the offense. And I think the best illustration of this is when Ken Dorsey was fired as offensive coordinator during the season last year for the Bills, and they brought in Joe Brady, right? You see what it looked like. They ran the ball more. They used Josh Allen a little bit less in running the football, but they were more diverse in their offensive attack and more direct in what they were trying to do. They weren't just trying to make Stephon Diggs happy. So I think he'll do great things for C.J. Stroud and the Texans, and I do think Josh Allen will be better, and by that, I think he'll be less turnover prone, because that's been his biggest issue since being a starter quarterback in the NFL. Josh Allen is a phenomenal quarterback, but I think he has to cut down on the turnovers, and I think not having Stephon Diggs and helping to grow guys like Dalton Kincaid and Keon Coleman, whom they just drafted out of Florida State, will help in that regard. He'll take care of the football more, so I do think he'll be better without Stephon Diggs. All right, that's it for your social media questions. When we come back from the break, it's my favorite segment of the show. So it's time for the Nonsense Narrative. We'll be back and we'll move the chains right after this. And welcome back into the show, man. It's time for the Nonsense Narrative, and I love this segment because I get a chance to call out narratives that I just don't like. And who knows, one day people may listen to my narratives and put me in their own nonsense narrative segment. It won't be nearly as fire, but you understand what we do here on Move the Chains. I like to look at situations and wonder why people said what they said. You give me a reason, even if I disagree, I'm all for it. But don't give me a narrative that I disagree with and then you can't back it up. Can't stand it. With all that being said, let's go ahead and run it. It's time for Nonsense Narrative. There are a lot of people that I listen to that feel like winning your division shouldn't decide seeding in the playoffs. So what do I mean by that? People think that just because you won your division, it doesn't make you better than another team. And since you're not necessarily better than that team based on your record, that team who didn't win their division should be seated higher than you should be. And see, and this is why I take issue with that. Because you see the Kansas City Chiefs next to me now. They don't fit into this category at all. But if you win your division, it means something. This isn't college football where there's realignment and things of that nature. Now, it has happened in the past, ladies and gentlemen. You have seen teams move divisions, and divisions have actually changed. But my point is, if you're able to win the division, you should have a first-round playoff game at home. Because winning your division matters. because there are only 8 divisions in the NFL, and to win one means something. It means that you were the best team in your division that year. Now, the real reason that a lot of people don't want to see these is because they don't want to see teams that they feel like should be Super Bowl contenders have to go on the road, and they'll say, well, man, it's not fair that this team had to go on the road, or it's not fair that this team got a matchup. And another reason people will say it is because, well, we need to make this change because it's just too many times that it happens, and I'm sick of seeing it. Oh, really? Well, that's not true, because I'm going to tell you this. There have been 3 occasions that I can remember, and I'm looking it up now, where teams did not have a winning record and won their division. The Washington football team back in 2020 went 7-9, and they won the NFC East. And remember, this is a time where nobody wins the NFC East in back-to-back years. Whatever situation is going on with this division, that's just the truth of the matter. In 2010, the Seattle Seahawks were 7-9. And they beat the Saints in the wild card game in Seattle. That was the earthquake game. Not necessarily, there wasn't a literal earthquake, but remember Marshawn Lynch, like Debo, like 5 or 6 defenders, starting with Tracy Porter from the Saints en route to a touchdown, and the whole stadium literally started shaking because the crowd was going crazy. That's right, the Seahawks were 7-9 that year. And the Carolina Panthers in 2014 were 7-8-1, and they won the division, and they beat the Seattle Seahawks in the divisional round. Man, if you're Seattle, you need to stop playing these teams that win a division that don't have a winning record. This is my point. It's happened 3 times. Why would you try to make a massive change to a situation that's only happened 3 times? Teams that usually win their division have a winning record, and just because they don't have necessarily one of the best records in the conference that year doesn't mean that they don't deserve a home playoff game. If you're a Super Bowl contender, and you were in a division like the AFC North, right, where 3 teams made the playoffs last year and the Bengals were the only team that didn't, and they did that without Joe Burrow and still finished above 500. If you're that good of a team, Cleveland, go on the road and win. You couldn't do it against Houston. That's not my fault. If you're a potential Super Bowl contender, go on the road and beat somebody. We just saw the Kansas City Chiefs, who were the 3 seed. They won their division, but they were the 3 seed, had 1 playoff game at home, but then went on the road to beat the Bills and the Ravens en route to the Super Bowl. So don't tell me that a team shouldn't have to go on the road and win a playoff game. At some point in time, typically, you're going to have to win a game away from home, whether it's in the playoffs or whether it's in the Super Bowl. So I don't want to hear people crying about division winners who don't have 12, 13 wins being able to get a playoff game at home. They won the division. It matters because it's the NFL. It's not college football. All right, that's it for my nonsense narrative. When we come back from the break, it's the final drive. We'll be back when we move the chains right after this. And welcome back into the show. Now, this is the last segment of the show, so you know what that means. It's time for the final drive. So the director, Ernest, said, you know, he always has these stats for me after the show that we talk about. And I said, man, this is what the final drive should be. So shout out to Ernest. Like I said, the production crew is amazing. HBCU guys, they are heavily represented, historically black colleges and universities in the Hall of Fame. And do you know that there are currently 35 players in the Hall of Fame that attended a historically black college and university? That's almost 10% of players in the NFL. You didn't know that, did you? I didn't either until Ernest told me. I'm talking about guys like Harry Carson, guys like Jerry Rice, guys like Sweetness, Walter Payton, guys like Michael Strahan, Mel Blount, just to name a few. So the point of this is, if you can ball, you can ball. Whether you go to an HBCU or not, the NFL will see you, and when they see you, you can show yourself to be a potential Hall of Famer. Congratulations to those guys, man. All right, remember, you can not only watch me right here on the Sports Leader WXTX Fox 54, but you can catch Move the Chains on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. It's at @move_the_chains. Leave a comment, leave a question, say anything that you want to say within reason, and we'll make sure that we can try to make it part of the show. All right, got another banger here, man. I'm your boy, Jonathan Rivers, for the best production crew in the business. This is what we do on Move the Chains. Until next time, God bless.